It was always going to end this way for Mel Tucker once the allegations first surfaced. No matter what he did, no matter what he said, it was always going to end up with Mel Tucker has been fired for cause. And that's what happened today with Michigan State. They gave Mel Tucker a week to respond to the allegations and make a defense for why he shouldn't be fired for cause. And apparently he never responded, or they didn't like or care about the answer that he gave. So Mel Tucker is going to be fired for cause at Michigan State and miss out on roughly $77 million of guaranteed money because he couldn't think with the right head. And that stinks for Mel Tucker in Michigan State. But to be fair and to be truthful, it was always going to end this way, no matter what. Because there are certain situations that you just can't come back from, at least at one place. I've maintained, and I'll continue to maintain, that if you get fired for any reason other than losing games, you can find a pathway back to college football, to college sports, whatever the case may be. And there are very few exceptions to that thinking. So far, Art Briles has been an exception to that thinking. So far, that's pretty much it. Hugh Freeze was hiring prostitutes with his school-issued cell phone on Tuesdays and then on Wednesdays telling you how great of a Christian he was. And his first job back was at the Christian University, and now is back in the Power Five. Rick Pitino got extorted after bumping uglies with a woman on the table of an Italian restaurant and cheating, not on his wife, but at college basketball, and now has I think the Big East is a Power Six job in college basketball. There are countless stories of people who have committed transgressions and come back out on the other side after a slight rehabilitation press tour where, you sit down with your Oprah and you go, I just made a lot of really stupid mistakes. And generally that's the path to getting back into the coaching profession and waiting for somebody to take a chance on you, is saying, hey, I screwed up. I made a lot of stupid mistakes. I'm sorry. I've learned. I'm a better man from this. And then in 4 years, Mel Tucker will be a Power 5 conference coach again. That's the likely end-all, be-all of what happened, what transpired today. Mel Tucker was told, hey, you're fired, and we're not going to pay you the money we're supposed to pay you. It's your fault. But you know what? You sit out for about a year and a half. If you become a defensive coordinator again for the 2025 season, you'll probably be a Power 5 head coach again by 2026, 2027. It's the reality of the situation. And I saw somebody say this the other day, and I thought, you know what? You're right. In that we no longer have there's no longer a court of public opinion. There is a court of social media. And generally, the court of social media doesn't acquit you of charges. Like Johnny Depp is about the only person who's been acquitted in the court of social media for their wrongdoings. It doesn't happen very often. So Mel Tucker is going to be convicted in the court of social media. And because we have the collective attention span of about 15 seconds, it won't be long until Mel Tucker is a head coach again in Power 5 college football. Because he's got a pretty good track record. He's got a pretty good track record as an assistant coach, and he did really good things at Michigan State his first couple of seasons there. I said from the get-go, I don't believe this is we've got to find a way to get out from under this contract from Michigan State. I don't think that's the case because it doesn't add up. The timeline isn't right. Things are going pretty well for Michigan State until this happened. It's just the reality of the situation. If they were 0-3 when that stuff came out about Mel Tucker, sure, that makes a lot of sense for them to say, okay, we got to find a way to get out from under this contract. But they were 2-0, and we're going into a really big game against Washington. That track record, that timeline doesn't add up. It just doesn't make a ton of sense. And so that's part of the reason why. And the other part of the reason is it certainly appears as if Brenda Tracy brought this up a really long time ago, and Michigan State kind of waited and took their sweet old time doing something with it, which is a problem in and of itself, where Mel Tucker can't afford to not file a lawsuit in this situation because there's $77 million guaranteed dollars at stake if he can prove that he didn't do anything wrong. It's going to be easier said than done of proving I didn't do anything wrong. But if you can make a case and you can win, you got a boatload of cash coming to you. He can't afford not to, unless there is some really damning evidence that showcases there was a reason that we made the decision that we made. And yet, I think that's the only path forward for Mel Tucker and the only path forward for Michigan State. You can't afford not to file a lawsuit, but if you do file that lawsuit, there are things that could come out that could damage your ability to make a living in the college football coaching profession going forward. Where seemingly, based on his track record of extensive time working in the college coaching profession, that would be Mel Tucker's preferred way of making money. And so there are two options. There are don't sue, eat your humble pie, and really have to just kind of sit on the sidelines and watch people trash you. Bide your time and return someday to the sideline, rehabilitate your image, and become a head coach again. Or you defend yourself vehemently and do everything you can to make Michigan State look like they got overzealous in firing you. Those are the options. And they're not, neither one of them are great options, because there's likely some evidence or something that makes Michigan State feel really strongly that they're in the right here. On the flip side, Mel Tucker, I don't think, can be real honked off about the idea of them reneging on the contract, because it certainly sounds as if he made millions of dollars while under investigation for sexual harassment. That Brenda Tracy let Michigan State know, hey, this happened. And Michigan State didn't suspend him without pay. They said, we're going to launch this investigation, yada, yada, yada. And so for months, Mel Tucker got paid handsomely. So the argument, I think, from Michigan State's standpoint is like, listen, dude, we paid you millions of dollars when we shouldn't have. Conceivably shouldn't have. We could have suspended you without pay the second this came up. We didn't do that, but we could have. And while you're owed $77 million or whatever that figure is, it could be $81 million if we hadn't paid you from the second that we probably should have stopped paying you. And there are some schools where you have to take things like this more serious. For instance, Bowling Green's hockey program is going through some turmoil right now because of some hazing allegations, where 3 players are suspended and the coach is suspended without pay. Bowling Green State University is one of those places that you can't have hazing, because a average run-of-the-mill student died from fraternity hazing a couple of years ago. They're going to take that a little bit more serious than they might at other universities, because when you are in the headlines, you make national news because a student died on your campus from hazing. The one thing you can't be guilty of less than 2 years later is hazing. Michigan State, along with Ohio State and Michigan and Penn State and probably other schools that haven't had it come to light yet, are places that you can't have sexual harassment or sexual misconduct allegations because of your history. You can't be the school that employed Larry Nassar and then come back in a couple of years and deal with another sexual harassment scandal. Can't do it. There's just some places where things have to be taken more serious than other places. Not that they should be, because sexual harassment should be taken seriously everywhere. Hazing should be taken seriously everywhere. If there were to be rape misconduct and find out that the coaches were covering it up so the players can continue to play at Baylor again, it's going to be a bigger deal. And so Michigan State is going to be one of those places where it is a bigger deal that somebody in a position of power, in this case, the highest paid employee in the state or at the university, it's going to be a big deal that that person is acting inappropriately. Whether you believe that that is valid, true, accurate, or not, you can't put yourself in a situation where the allegations can be made and even appear credible. Can't happen. So Mel Tucker walked himself into a bad situation and now is dealing with the consequences of his own actions. And while that may suck, and while you might think that that's cancel culture, that's the reality of the situation, is that Mel Tucker put himself in a situation that he cannot defend. Because going back to the allegations that were made against Mel Tucker, similarly to there are some places that you can't have these sort of allegations, there are some people that you can't have an inappropriate relationship with. And if you are a married man, whether you believe that it should be fair and it should be reasonable for him to do whatever he wants in his private life, there are just a couple of people that you can't check your dipstick with. And the woman that you have hired to teach your players that women aren't just pieces of meat and trophies to be won, and how to ask for consent and not be the victim of rape allegation misconducts, and how to act appropriately with women, that woman is one of the few people you can't have an inappropriate relationship with. It's off limits. No matter whether you think that should be the case or not, it's just how it is. And yet, that's what Mel Tucker did. So, in full, it was always going to end this way with Mel Tucker once those allegations came out. That's just the truth. The second that it dropped that he was accused of these things, there wasn't really a scenario where he was going to coach Michigan State again, barring he had audio tape of his transgressions, and it turned out that they weren't transgressions. That was the only way that any of this was going to be solved. And I don't know about you, but I generally don't keep recordings of my infidelity against my wife of 20 years. It's unlikely that Mel Tucker had an audio recording and was going to be able to exonerate himself. It was always going to end this way with Mel Tucker. And it just was a matter of time. And here we are. This is the Daily Huddle. I'm Garrett Searight. Appreciate you making us a part of your day, however it is, wherever it is you're doing so. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. Give the video a thumbs up. Goes a really long way in helping out the channel. If you are listening on the podcast, drop a 5-star review. And we'll read those here on the show. So now the logical question is, where does Michigan State go from here? Because there are options. I think it's still a somewhat attractive job. And I think it's somewhat an attractive job because, and this is not how like B-tier college football programs should operate, but Michigan State is an attractive job because Luke Fickell is no longer at Cincinnati. If you look at when Michigan State was at their best under Mark D'Antonio, They were coming in and recruiting the hell out of the state of Ohio. So the best players would be, the elite players in the country, and would be recruited by your Ohio States, Notre Dame's, Michigan, Alabama, USC, Clemson at the time, etc. And then there are a lot of really good 3-star players that you could turn into and develop to really good football players. And that's what Michigan State did. When they got to the college football playoff, it was on the backs pretty much of kids from Ohio. And there's a direct correlation with the rise of Cincinnati and, to a lesser extent, Kentucky, and the downfall of Michigan State, where you can see that those two paths intersect at some point, where Cincinnati got infinitely better and Michigan State started to really tail off at the end of Mark D'Antonio's tenure. Because Michigan State didn't come in and clean up on the second-tier Ohio kids anymore. They were competing with those kids with Cincinnati and Kentucky. And they were losing. And so they weren't so good anymore. And now Luke Fickell is gone at Cincinnati. God bless Scott Satterfield. He's not going to have a juggernaut at UC like Luke Fickell did. So those second-tier Ohio kids are ripe for the picking again. And you're always going to have a shot with the top-tier kids in Michigan and Indiana. Indianapolis is becoming, a much better recruiting hub than it was 20 years ago. So the opportunities to succeed at Michigan State are going to be there. And then you throw on top the fact that the Big Ten is going to go away from divisions, and you're not going to have to beat Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State every single year to even have a chance to go to the college football playoff. I think Michigan State's a really good job. I think Michigan State is the Auburn of the Big Ten, where regardless of whether you want to admit it or not, there is a big brother on the block. But every 5 to 10 to 15 years, not only can you be a conference championship contender, you can be a national championship contender. I think Michigan State has that ability. They have that fan base, the support, the facilities. I think they have that ability. It's just getting the right guy. And I wonder who that guy is in their eyes, because obviously they thought pretty highly of Mel Tucker because he got fat stacks of cash from those folks. And when you're willing to say, if you have the mildest of success, where was it the 2020 season? I think it was. The 2020 season, no, it's the 2021 season where they ended up beating Michigan and playing in a Peach Bowl. The 2021 season, they go 11-2, and Mel Tucker gets paid. And that is with close wins against Nebraska and IU and Michigan State and Penn State. They go 11-2, and he was viewed as one of the best coaches in college football. Maybe that was a little premature. I think obviously Michigan State, if they could do it over again, would maybe do something differently. But it tells any prospective candidates like, hey, this is going to be a big deal if you can come here and win. If you can come here and do a really good job, you're going to get paid, and your assistants are going to get paid, and we're going to do whatever it takes to put you in a position to succeed. And if that interests you, hell yeah. I don't think Michigan State's going to have the Big Ten tunnel vision like there has been, and I've mentioned before. I think this is one of the problems with the SEC is the idea that like the SEC tunnel vision and the SEC self-importance of like, okay, we're going to try Will Muschamp again. This time he's going to be a good coach. No, he's not. We're going to try Jeremy Pruitt again. No. Just because somebody was an assistant or a coordinator inside your conference doesn't make them the best person for your job. Like Joe Moorhead was the head coach at Mississippi State, and I think would have done a nice job. But because he He didn't have success somewhere else in the SEC. He was a nobody to his fan base, I think is ridiculous. So I know that there's been like so much, oh man, Brian Hartline, the offensive coordinator of Ohio State, who's just this recruiting juggernaut, makes a ton of sense at Michigan State. I don't know if that's the case or not. It doesn't appear as if there's anybody in the MAC that makes a just slam dunk hire. I don't know if Sean Lewis, who's the offensive coordinator at Colorado, who had been the head coach at Kent State, if he can stay on the trajectory. I don't know who the perfect person is for Michigan State. But I know if they find a really good coach, that they have the ability to be in the upper echelon of the Big Ten year after year after year. I just wonder who that person is and whether they make the right hire or not. But that's the first one open this year. There's going to be a lot of talk, a lot of questions. I wonder where they go. Frankly, to tell the truth, I think Tom Herman is going to be on that list for Michigan State, where he's got experience at Houston and Texas. The only reason he's not the head coach at Texas anymore is because they got impatient and thought, if we don't hire Steve Sarkisian, somebody's gonna, so it might as well be us. And they fired Tom Herman. So he's rehabilitated his image. He knows the Big Ten. I think that's an option at some point. But there are some other, like Kalen DeBoer at Washington. Is that a step up for Kalen DeBoer? No, not really. Are Washington and Michigan State on an even playing field? I think so. So I don't expect, and maybe some things happen. I don't know. I just know that there's a possibility that Michigan State hires a slam dunk candidate and returns to being a 9-3, 10-2, 11-1 team in the not so distant future. That'll do it for today's edition of the Daily Huddle on Saturday Glory. Appreciate you making us a part of your day. Drop a 5-star review on the podcast. Subscribe, hit the thumbs up on the YouTube video. It goes a long way in helping out the channel. Tomorrow, I want to talk about how we decide who the best teams in America are, because I have a radical opinion on this that I'll share with you on tomorrow's edition of the Daily Huddle here on Saturday Glory. We'll see you.